This is the Nomad Futurist podcast, a podcast about the evolution of technology, society, and transformation. Connect with us, share your thoughts with us at nomadfuturist.com. Let's get this started. Here are Phil and Nabil.
Hello. Welcome to Nomad Futurist. This is your host, Nabil Mahmood from Kona, Hawaii.
This is your co-host, Philip Koblenz from Montclair, New Jersey.
And this is Peter Hannaford, talking to you from a little town about 30 miles north of London town in the United Kingdom.
Peter, thank you very much for taking the time and joining us at this time of the day. Welcome to the podcast. Before we get started, I would like our listeners to know a little bit more about you. So could you tell us who you are, what you do, and where are you at in your career?
Sure. So I listened to a couple of your podcasts before, and people always start by saying, how much time have you got? Well, listen, I know how much time you've got, so I'm going to keep this within the allotted time scale. So I'm kind of, I've been in this game for 50 years. I know you don't believe that, but but it's true. So I'm kind of a child of the 60s, I guess. I was in London during the 60s. I was at school during the 60s. And that was a brilliant place to be. You didn't realize it at the time, but now you look back and you think, what a wonderful time to be kind of alive and in London during that time. So school wasn't high on the agenda. So I left school after we have these sort of O levels, which is like the first lot of qualifications you get. Not many people wanted to go to university, so we just wanted to get out there into the world. So I left school and I wanted to be a journalist, but I got shortlisted for a job on the local newspaper, but because the other guy typed his application and I wrote mine, he got the job. So my dad said, look, I've got a friend who's in banking and he makes a lot of money on the stock market. Why don't you go into banking? Well, listen, why not? It's a job. And in those days, you could more or less pick the job you wanted. There were more jobs than people. We were very lucky. So I went to work for a bank and I discovered, pubs and soccer. So I played football. My life revolved around playing soccer on a Saturday. And it was just a great time. And I'd only been there a few years when we're now sort of talking about the late 60s, when commercial computing was just coming into its own. So firms were starting to buy these computers. They had nobody to program them or operate them because people didn't exist. So the bank I was with bought a computer. They gave everybody an aptitude test. If you could add up three numbers, that was it. You were in. So I joined the computer department first as an operator, and then as a programmer. And I've noticed a few of your people, I think, including you, Phil, had a bit of experience in programming. So I was a programmer. Of course, in those days, to be a programmer, you're a bit like being a rock star. It was the next best thing. A computer program was brilliant. And I tell you, I loved it. Unlike a few other people that I've spoken to, I just loved programming. I thought, and I still think that's the best job I've ever had, because it's the kind of job where you finish what you're doing. You get to work on something, you write the program. Sometimes you're up all night. I can remember coming out the bank at dawn, having been trying to get this program to run, and it ran, and I came out, 10 foot in the air, because you finished it, you've done it, you run it, and it worked. And I thought that was brilliant. And I've never had a job quite like that, because as you progress, you never really get where you're going. There's always that horizon that you never get to. So it's not the same. Not that I'd want to go back. So I did this for a few years. I was pretty dedicated. I did love working, as I say, and I enjoyed it. And the bank decided to open in Nigeria, in West Africa. And although it was a French bank I worked for, because Nigeria was an ex sort of British colony. They wanted Brits to go and staff it up. So I went out there in 76 to help them start the bank in Nigeria, which meant building a data center of sorts, and set up the computer department and have that running. And that was a brilliant time. When I went there, they told me this is the land of limitless impossibility. And I tell you, trying to run a data center when you only have power for 8 hours a day is a bit of a challenge. And people used to steal things, and it was pretty interesting, shall I say. But anyway, it was a great time. They paid me a lot of money to do it. They paid, your house was provided, your driver, your nanny. It was a pretty good time, and your salary was paid offshore, so even better. It was a bit like winning the lottery. But health wasn't so good. My wife had everything, miscarriage, dysentery, malaria. So we thought, hey, it's a great time, but maybe after 3 or 4 years, it's time to go back. So I went back, and they put me in charge of the data processing department, which was good. So, here I am. I think I was about 30 years old then, in charge of the computer department, which again was good fun. And that was the days when, when I went back, we'd inherited. Somebody they decided to buy this Data General computer, which at the time was state of the art, right? But all my chums in other banks had IBM. I wanted to be an IBM customer. I just loved the whole thing. So, IBM would fly you off in their jets all over the place. And I thought, yeah, I like this kind of thing. And we ended up buying IBM. And I was a big fan of IBM at the time. I thought they were a brilliant organization. They could have sold anything. Could have sold toilet rolls, but they just happened to sell computers. But they were so good at it. And I loved the company. I was a huge fan. And then I got headhunted myself off to an Arab consortium bank in Paris, a bit smaller, but with a global remit. And I went there, and that was, I was in Paris most of my time. And then that bank got acquired by another French bank. So I left, and I used my redundancy money to start my first company. So I got to the point where I like working, but I thought, because I sort of work a lot. My wife used to tell me, if you were a postman, you'd end up looking for more letters to deliver at the end of the day. Why don't you stop working? It's not your company. And I thought, no, it isn't. But maybe I should have my own company. So in 1989, I started my company. I started a company that would relocate other companies, but where. So if a big firm was moving, we would do all the planning for them. We'd build their computer rooms. If it was a bank, we'd build their dealing rooms. So there was still a lot of technology involved. Our sort of strapline was if you're moving your office and on day one your chairs aren't there, well, you can sit on orange boxes. But if your phones aren't working or your network is down, it's a bit serious. So that was our USP. So I started this company in '89. And we did pretty well. And then in 1995, this dot-com bubble came along. And we moved into building data centers. I mean, at that time, around 85, 86, 87, anyone that had a garage wanted to turn it into a data center. It was a boom time for data centers. So we got in. We were one of the first people to design and build data centers. And it was because there was nobody else doing it. I had somebody knock on the door one day and said, "Look, I've got some racks over this co-location, the telehouse over the way here, and but I want my own data center." So I went out with him to look at buildings. We were looking at 5,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet buildings. And then he saw this building that was 120,000 square feet and said, I think we'll turn it into a data center. Can you do it? Of course I can, I said. So we built this thing on the back of a cigarette packet. We really made it up as we went along. But we did it pretty quickly. The trick, you get obviously smarter people in that do know what they're doing. So we built that, and we became one of the biggest design and build firms in data centers in Europe. And our turnover went from nothing to $200 million in like a few years. It was crazy time. But then, of course, it all came to a crash in 2000. The whole thing stopped. Just before we crashed, we were seen as the picks and shovels. Investment banks were coming to us and saying, "Hey, you guys, you're building these things. We'd like to, invest in you." And a few people did invest in us. So the company was valued at that time at about $20 million. And as I owned 80% of it, that was it. I was made, except, a few weeks later, it all fell off a cliff and I could tear that bit of paper up and throw it away. So we carried on for a bit. I sold the company to somebody else, one of the big data center operators, because we were in the middle of building this big data center for them. And we had a bit of a catch-22. They're not paying us. We're not building it. They've raised a lot of money on leveraging these big data centers. So I sold it on to them and went on and did something else. We carried on in the business, kind of doing design and build. And during that journey, we'd invented a bit of technology. We were trying to figure out how to build data centers in a more efficient way. And we came up with this, with a rack, which had its own cooling in it for high density computing. But it was unlike some of these other people that had developed this technology. So our cooling coil was vertical in the rack. So we were delivering the same kind of cooling top to bottom. And I sold the company to APC, to American Power Conversion, in 2003. So I went to work for APC then, and what a brilliant company that was. I loved that. You were just allowed to do things, a lot of freedom. Probably the best boss I've ever had. He was in St. Louis, I'm in London, but we just got on famously. And that went on for a couple of years until they sold the company to Schneider Electric, bought APC in 2007. Memorable day. It was Valentine's Day on 2011 that they bought the company, and things changed a little. Schneider's a very big company, very good company, got some great people, but 150,000 people, it wasn't for me. So I stayed there for a few years and then decided to go back out into the world again. So I didn't really know what to do. I've never really known what to do. I still don't know what to do. I'm still looking for my job. I'm drifting along here thinking I'm not quite sure what I want to do when I grow up. Maybe I've never grown up. And then I thought, look, I know a lot of people. I've got a big fat address book. Maybe I should go into, headhunting, recruitment, because people keep asking you, do you know anybody? So I found that there wasn't one recruitment company that specialized in our sector. Nobody had sort of just nailed it. So I set up a company called Data Center People, and we went into recruitment. And then I did that for 10 years. I started an executive search arm a couple of years back, which I liked a lot more because you get to meet a lot of people. It's all about meeting people. It's not transactional. And then I sold Data Center People to the management. They did an MBO in 2020, earlier this year in January. And I'm now trundling along doing executive search with Portman. They're still working on a global basis. So we have people in Singapore and in London. So that's what I'm doing. I'm still looking for, something I really want to do when I grow up.
What a great story this is. From playing football to wanting to become a journalist, to getting into IT and coding, to getting into data center space and designing building infrastructures, to designing a product and selling it to one of the largest manufacturers globally and leading that initiative, now to the executive search and helping out the data center industry. Immaculate. This is absolutely phenomenal. You know, it's kind of interesting that you bring up that you're still trying to find yourself. Aren't we all? But you've had a lot of great experiences through this journey. What's one thing that really stands out for you, and what's that magic for your success and the experiences that you've developed over the last 30 years of your career?
I don't look at it as success. I don't think I've been successful. I mean, I just carried on. You know, I mean, I sit there.
I would say that you've affected a lot of people's lives. You've contributed a lot to the infrastructure. Like, for instance, you're selling the product over to Schneider or APC, for that matter, with in-row cooling. I mean, that was a game changer. I mean, people were still mixing hot air with cold air till you came up with a solution like that. I mean, I wouldn't leave myself short there.
Yeah, I mean, look, it wasn't me personally. I mean, I had a guy. I was sort of the commercial guy. I can take if I've got any skill, it's taking an idea and doing something with it. I'm not always the guy that comes up with the idea. You know, if I hear it and I like it, I'm a bit of an entrepreneur, I guess. You know, that's where I put all my efforts. But you're right, it was a game changer. And even now, you know, when you place people into companies, you just got that feeling that they're going to make a big difference. And it is satisfying. And I know, and you know, it sounds trite, but I know that when I do finally disappear, at least there will be some legacy. Yeah, people can say that, you know, did I make a difference? Well, in a small way, I guess I do, because that technology was, as you say, it was a game changer, and everybody copied it, you know. So most of the cooling manufacturers in their portfolio somewhere have a rack with a vertical coil in there. And that's the basis of, you know, of a lot of solutions these days. I mean, cooling these days is becoming less important. Now people have woken up to the fact that you know, 27 degrees or whatever the ASHRAE benchmark is, 27 degrees is not cold. You know, you get to 27 degrees in the UK and we put our swimming shorts on. I know it's probably cold to you, Nabil, but to us in the rest of the world, 27 degrees is pretty warm. So the fact that these, you know, the temperatures have gone up from the days when it was, you know, everybody shivered in data centers, it's changed a lot now. So people have come to realize. In fact, when I was at Schneider, I banned the use of cooling. I said, this isn't cooling. We're not talking about cooling. We're talking about heat removal. You're talking about removing excess heat. You're not cooling things.
Well, I think in general, when people walked into a data center, you know, it was about aesthetics. It was about how they felt, not about what was optimal for the computer, right? So I ran a data center, and I still, to a certain extent, run a data center. When you're walking someone through it, there's just this expectation that they're cold, whether that's the best thing for the computer or not. Frankly, you know, the colder the air and the larger the differential between the air inside the computer and outside the computer, you're basically creating condensation that forms inside. You probably don't want it to be, you know, as differential as, say, the guy in the suit that walks into the data center and just picks the data center based on which one he's the coldest in.
Yeah, and in fact, you know, humidity is much more probably important than you know, temperature. It's obviously fluctuations, but once people got to know that. But yeah, coming back to your point, Nabil, no, I don't think of myself as being successful. I'm content. You know, when I look around, when I think for the last, you know, it's given me a living for the last, you know, 50 years or so, and yeah, you know, I've got a nice house and nice cars and things. So I guess when you think about it, yeah, it's given me a living. But I don't think of it as a success, funnily enough. Not in the way that, you know, some of these other guys have done it.
Here's the thing that's here's the thing that's amazing. You know, I think the current generation has been kind of trained to try to have a plan. You know, this is what I want to do for a living. This is where I'm going to go to school. I want to be in finance, or I want to be a lawyer, and this is the trajectory I need to follow in order to be successful. And, you know, keep your eye on the prize, if you will. And what I have found about the most successful people, and I don't know, I mean, your humbleness is incredible, but I can assure you, you've been a success. You've sold, you know, several companies that you've started and sold to these large organizations. It's an amazing story, but you know, the people that are the most successful are the ones that just kind of, you know, went with the flow and just allowed, you know, the circumstances to dictate how they responded to them, and didn't necessarily have that fear of change and fear of not following some preordained plan. How much do you think that was, a large factor to your success? And how do you, is that something you can teach? Is that something that you just had, or, you know, was there a conscious effort to just kind of go with the flow?
Yeah, no, it wasn't a conscious effort. I mean, that's the whole point.
Right.
It was very unconscious. I think what you need is confidence to be able to do something. Something that you're not sure about. I think being a programmer also teaches you logic as well. So you're doing these things in step. I mean, even today, I need to know what I'm going to do, not in an hour's time, but after that and after that and after that. I need a plan in my head. It doesn't always work out, but I want to know what it is. And I think maybe, you know, programming taught you that. But no, look, if you teach them anything, it's be bold and courageous and give it a go. And don't be afraid of failure. I mean, everybody will also say this, you know, if you win 6 out of 10, you're doing pretty well. And I've had a few disasters. The only thing that's probably kept me from jumping off a bridge was my wife kept telling me, you know, what's the problem? Just get on with it. You know, and I'm thinking, I'm pulling my hair out. As you can see, there's not much left. But I'm pulling my hair out thinking, what's going to happen? This is not going to work. And she's saying, don't be ridiculous, you know, get on with it. And so you do. There's nowhere else to go. You know, there have been a point when I thought, this is not going to work. You know, we're not getting any business in. This has gone wrong. What am I going to do next? And then you can't think of what to do next. So you think, hey, you know what? I've just got to make this work. And you do. And you need to be persistent. I say, so I think you need them to tell them, and they need to learn that not everything works the way you want it to work. You've got to accept sometimes that, you know, you're going to have problems and you're going to have failures. And in the US, it's different. You know, you embrace failures. In fact, you probably cannot be successful unless you've had a few failures and a few scars along the way. Kind of in the UK, that wasn't quite the same. You know, you never like to admit that you failed. There was an embarrassment. We used to have a thing it was written up in our computer, and, you know, there are no failures, only varying degrees of success. So whatever you did, you know, we were doing okay. So yeah, it's you just gotta learn that.
You know, don't dwell, don't ruminate, don't sit and focus on what you can't do. Try to come up with a solution and just pivot and move forward. It's an incredible lesson that I think some people have a difficult time recognizing when, you know, they're kind of in the midst of it. You have to be able to have that kind of 30,000 foot view and a recognition that whatever you're going through is not like some unbelievably existential crisis. It's just an issue and a problem that needs to be resolved. And, you know, you just, if it doesn't work one way, you just try to pivot.
Yeah. And I think if you had that vision early on, this is what I'm going to do, and you've got it mapped out and it doesn't work, that's when you kind of suffer a little bit. But if you are going to be a little bit flexible, if you like doing what you're doing, just keep doing it. I mean, that's what, you know, my boss way back in APC, my annual appraisal, I used to fly all the way over to St. Louis. I'd sit in his office. He'd say to me, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Now let's go and have a beer. And that was it. That was my annual appraisal. I mean,
I think you have actually nailed it on the head. The fear of failure is the root cause for people not trying to take the risks. And Phil and I have actually talked about this plenty of times in the previous podcast as well, whereby I've got a mindset that fail stands for first attempt in learning. And it should be just taken in that way, whereby it's an opportunity to excel. One of the things that I've learned about you in this conversation and prior conversations is that you're a risk taker. And at the end of the day, you've actually been doing things and getting yourselves engaged and involved in things and projects with a core value of just doing good for the environment, just doing good for the infrastructure, and just being that change agent. Where and how did you develop that skill set?
Look, as I say, it's hard skin, I suppose. It comes from, I guess it comes from, when you're very young. It's got to start somewhere. Because I think, when we look now we're I'm looking for talent, for exceptional talent. And what we tend to look for is, number one is intellect. Now, you've got to be smart and you can't go to school to learn to be smarter. You can't take any tablets to make you smarter. Intellect is something that's built in. It's in your DNA from a very young age. How you use it, is different. So you're given a good start if you've got some bit of intellect. And I suppose, maybe I had a little bit of that early on. And once you're smart, I think you can learn to do these things. And I've always been one that I will try something. I mean, anyone that's worked with me would know, you get an idea and we're going to do that. I put it right up the flagpole and say, let's go for this. And people say, well, just a minute. What about this? What about this? And I think if you work with people, you can't do this, this go for it all the time. You do need people that you work with that will balance that out. So there are people that will start at the bottom of the flagpole and work up. I used to start at the top and come down when they drag me down a bit. So yeah, I just think it's probably something that's in you. I don't think you can learn it. It's probably experience. Not many people have had that long experience that I have. And I think in our world, I'm not saying you don't get smarter, you do get wiser. But you tend to look at the big picture. And I don't think enough people look at the big picture these days. They're looking at their own little box, whether it's their network or power or whatever it is, they're stuck in that little box. They're not looking at that, as you say, the 30,000 foot view. Why are we doing this? What's the purpose of all this? We all know that the climate change and everything else is causing a big problem. We need to do something about it, but we nibble away at the edges without doing the really big thing. And I used to when PUE was a big thing, when you had PUEs at like 3 in the bad old days, I actually worked out that while we're just working at PUE in the data center, I actually tracked back, the power. I thought, well, where's all this power coming from and how efficient? So you track it all the way back to the coal mine, basically. And you figure out that the amount of coal you need to generate a megawatt in a power station is a lot. And yet they're only 50% efficient. So 50% of that thermal energy is going straight up the chimney, back at source. And then you lose a little bit through distribution. And then you get to the data center. And then, whatever it is, 2 times, 3 times was being used for power and cooling and all the other stuff. But unless you take a look at that whole chain, you don't realize how inefficient, where you need to change things. So you just need to take a step back sometimes and have a look at the whole picture. It's getting a lot better now, obviously. So people have figured out that, we need to be more efficient, and we'll see where that goes. But the big thing, of course, is we're still using this technology, and all the arguments are raging now about maybe we should switch the stuff off and how efficient is Zoom compared to flying around all over the world? Well, for me, it's a no-brainer, but people will still tell you that, having Zoom calls is not very efficient and is generating, millions of tons of carbon. But those arguments will go on for some time.
Well, those carbon emissions are a lot less than flying around the airplane across the world, especially for your appraisal just to go have a beer. Folks that don't know what PUE is, and for our listeners, just to clarify, PUE is power user effectiveness, which is actually a metric that we use in the data center industry to figure out the actual utilization of the power. So just think about it this way. Every time you send out an email, a lot of power is actually being burned or utilized in the back end. And it's one of the metrics that we use to create more of an efficient environment and reduce the carbon footprint, which is really the goal for a lot of major companies on a go-forward basis, whereby we want to be in some way, form, or shape carbon neutral at some point in time in the near future. Having said that, Peter, you're interacting with a lot of people, especially with your executive search. What are some of the traits that you look for executives in the data center space or in information technology?
Well, it's finding people that fit, really. I wish our clients would just let me pick the people for them. I think sometimes I know the people that would work, but they somehow don't make it through. What do we look for? So we're looking, as I say, primarily for people that are smart. So intellect is always number one. Then things like, you want people that are passionate. You want people that are motivated. And in fact, the last thing we look at is experience, because that's the one thing that can change. As I said earlier, intellect won't change. You've either got it or you haven't got it. That doesn't mean you're useless, because there's always jobs. It depends on the job.
What's that line from The Departed? The world needs plenty of plumbers.
Well, they do, yeah. I mean, we used to have this thing in.
Love plumbers, by the way. I don't want to get angry.
No, that's fine.
The world does need plenty of plumbers. We'd be lost without you.
In one of my old firms, they were paranoid about having A players. And you think, where are all the B and C? Where's the soldiers? Where's the guys that are going to do the work? Because you can have all these smart people. But all I'm saying is, so intellect is important, motivation, whatever your values are very important. But the last thing we look for is, the resume tells you what somebody's done before. It doesn't tell you what they're capable of doing. And the trick is to find out what you think they will be capable of doing in this company. So company culture, getting the right fit into a company is very important. You need to get to know the company. I'm very lucky with some of our clients. I know them pretty well. I know the people there. So it's easy for us to find good people. And it's also, Schneider is a brilliant company. But it didn't work for me because I'm too entrepreneurial. But at least I know the kind of people that really fit an organization like that and who would really thrive in that organization. So it helps to have that, personal experience as well of what it's like to be in a company where maybe you're not the right fit and how frustrating it can be. It's that magic thing about having somebody that fits, the right people that fit in the right organization.
I have to imagine that I know the answer to this question, but I imagine formal education in a particular discipline is not necessarily on the top of your list for a particular job.
No, but it's part of the selection process. If you're looking at 20, 30 people for a particular job, you have to start somewhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be the formal education, but that's part of the filtering process. I mean, I'm currently judging. I'm a judge on the Data Center Dynamics Awards 2020 awards panel at the moment. I'm looking at Young Mission Critical Engineer of the Year. Now, 10 years ago, we were moaning about the average data center engineers, a 55-year-old white male. Where on earth are we going to go from here? And now, looking at these candidates, I mean, it is difficult to choose, and you cannot find a more diverse bunch of people from all countries around the world who look to be amazing what they've done. So I don't think we need to worry too much about the future in terms of the education and training. I mean, most people in the industry today fell into it. We didn't choose this industry. We just drifted into it, and we've made it work. So, but now we're finding people that are, have woken up to the fact that there is this world of digital infrastructure, digital acceleration, where I want to be part of it. And so I'm not at all concerned anymore about the future. There's plenty of talent out there and super smart kids coming on to take over from old people like me.
The last question on this on this kind of the selection process, given what you do with Executive Church, which is like, what kind of questions would you ask? Like, how do you determine that special something, that zeitgeist, that magic? Obviously, it's not. Is it just a matter of just asking about their background and you just trying to pick it up as part of a standard conversation, or is there almost some type of survey that you ask where there'll be a particular question where that will be informative of how they answer that question?
It's probably not as scientific as that. I mean, executive search was always face to face. We would always have to meet people. This wasn't something you could do over the phone. So you have to meet them. You have to see how they react, whether there's any, empathy there. And you just get a good feeling. Of course, we can't do that. We haven't been able to do that since March. But because Zoom and Teams have taken over, and in fact, will continue to take over. So how people behave virtually is now becoming important. And sometimes, when you first somebody flashes up on the screen, you've got a big picture, there's a gut, you initially, whether they're smiling or the way they're behaving, suddenly you think, we're off to a good start here. So the glass starts as half full. And there are some people that just make the hairs on the back of my neck stick up. I mean, we've got one particular candidate who's being interviewed for a job. And they're looking for, as you say, they're looking for this exceptional candidate. They describe it as the wow factor. We want someone that's going to wow us. And I tell you, this guy, he literally, when I'm talking to him, I'm getting very excited about just what he's saying, the way he's saying it, the questions he's asking as well. You always like to think, you'll always get the candidate that you're talking to, and it's clear they haven't done any research on the company before the call. And in a way, you can understand that because we're calling them. It's not like they've applied for the job. So you're calling them. We're still trying to interest you in this particular role. Most of the people are what we call passive high performers. They're very happy in their job, but they're at the top of the game. You're going to try and dissuade them to move somewhere else. So you just get it as the conversation progresses.
In your conversations and your search for the executives, could you lay out a couple of questions? How do you judge someone's personality? I mean, and especially in this time and age that we are in right now, where we're doing this over a video call. The body language isn't there, or if it is, it's hard to read through it. The eye contact isn't there. I might be looking at the camera, in the camera, away from the camera, whatever the case might be. That experience is not the same. How do you go about developing that personal relationship through this virtual world that we're living in now?
Well, again, you got to obviously look at what the job is first of all. So if you're looking for, a CTO, it may be a slightly different person you're looking for than if they're a VP of sales, so or a CEO. So you need to look at the job and what the requirements are, and it's not just a question of ticking boxes, but you'd be asking them to describe their experience. And then you might throw in something. If they're not from the data center industry, and a lot of them aren't, they're coming in from outside, you'll ask them, tell me a bit about, what do you know about data centers? How important are data centers? Just to see if they've done that bit of homework. And sometimes, questions I used to ask a question to the more technical people about, I'd say to somebody, what are the biggest changes you've seen in the industry over the last 20 years? Now, of course, most people haven't been in the industry 20 years. So, you get a lot of people today that are data center experts. You join LinkedIn, data center expert. That I used to know most people. I don't know anybody these days. So yeah, there's a few questions you can throw in about, like cooling, or what big changes have you seen in cooling? Now, of course, there's no answer. There's no right or wrong, but it's just the way they describe the thing. How do you really understand what's been going on?
You're really gauging confidence more than you're gauging like a specific amount of knowledge.
Yeah, you are. Are they articulating what they're trying to say properly? Am I understanding it? Is it are we having a conversation here that I can respond to and you can respond to?
Are they reading a Wikipedia page?
Well, yeah, and some of them do. But it's how they react as well. Even if what you want people to say is, it's a good question, but I don't know the answer to that. And even if they don't know it, how do you explain that? Don't try to answer it if you don't know the answer, because you'll just trip up and there's a big red cross you put on.
And what more confidence is there than admitting that you don't know the answer to a particular question and how you handle that? It's almost better to ask them a question they shouldn't know, so you see how they handle not knowing something.
Yeah, I don't do it deliberately, but sometimes it happens. I get, I know they're not going to know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. And sometimes they surprise you. This young guy I mentioned now, he had done so much homework on the company. He'd looked at annual reports. He'd looked at the chairman. He'd looked into all their backgrounds, all their history. He really wanted the job. And you don't expect people early on in the process to want the job. I mean, typically you'd get, this used to happen, at HR, it's a good example where they'd we'd introduce them to somebody and they'd call them and they'd say, so why do you want to work for us? And the guy'd say, I don't. You called me. I don't want to work for you. You tell me why I should come and work for you. So, but when you get people, and it often starts like that. They don't want to work for them because they've never heard of them, or they don't know what the job is, and they don't apply for the jobs. But as you go through the process, if they really want the job, that comes across in how keen they are to get feedback. You'll interview somebody in the morning, in the afternoon, they'll be saying, how did I get on? You say, well, as far as I'm concerned, you got on fine. I'm going to introduce you to, the next level of the process.
But I imagine they're too eager. That's a problem too, right? I mean, it's a tell.
It could be, yeah, because they're going to be disappointing. So I suppose the best.
I think poker player. I think that's what you should do with the next version of your life. You should be a poker player.
I did used to play cards, some time ago. I can't remember if I was any good or not. I think there's no science to it. If it was that easy, you could automate it. This would be a prime candidate for AI. Feed your resume in. Here's the job description. Is this guy the one or not? I mean, a lot of people place great store on psychometrics as well. I'm not a huge fan of psychometrics, I must say. But it can, this is the process where you do ask weird questions. You're walking down the lawn and you see, a body on the floor and, what do you do? I mean, all this stuff,
This is taking a dark turn.
But there is, I don't want to knock it because there is a psychology behind it. I'm learning too. And I think the big thing at the moment is diversity. That's huge now. And I was a late convert. We have somebody that works with us. I mean, she's an associate professor at university. She's an academic. Her specialty is psychology. And and what a difference diversity makes at senior level. And we've been running a series of events called Balance in the Boardroom, and she's chairing this thing. And I said to her, look, really, I can't actually see. We get a lot of clients saying we want more women in the process, and I'm saying, look, if you look at the UK. Only 6% of engineers in the UK are women. So if we're trying to find an engineer for a particular role, senior role, and we only have to put 10 resumes on the table, it's going to be very difficult for a woman to make that 10 because they don't exist. And she said to me, look, what you've got to remember is that women think differently to men. I said, listen, I've been married for 50 years. Don't you think I know that? She said, no, but it's true. And it made me realize that, in fact, that is when we talk about diversity, we are not talking about ethnicity, race, gender, age. What we're talking about is thinking, how people think. And that thinking is conditioned, obviously, by all those things. But it does give that element of difference when you're at a senior level, and I've become a big convert now. So the other thing we look for now, Phil, is an element of diversity, especially at these senior levels. I think it is very important. You get different views on things, which I say is conditioned by people's upbringing and a whole host of things.
All right. So a couple of takeaways that I've taken from it is that be real, keep it real, be yourself. It's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yeah, don't fake it. Whatever you do, don't try to fake it, because you're going to go into a job where you're going to be miserable and you're not going to do a good job. Let us decide whether we think you're going to fit well into this company.
Let's switch gears here real quickly as far as pandemic is concerned. We've been in the lockdown for a long time. We've stretched the boundaries of computing. We've stretched the boundaries of mankind and the social interaction. Where do you think we are headed? How does 2021 look in your discussions and in your experience?
Well, obviously, from a business environment, the world is obviously relying on us, basically. So digital transformation is the key to everything. So in a business environment, we're in, thank God that we are working in this world, and we're not in aviation or airlines or some of these other things are going to suffer. I don't think we're going to get back to, I don't know what the new norm is going to look like. It's not going to look like it did in January this year, for sure. I think we're all going to learn to, we're probably never going to shake hands with people again. It's all going to be elbows. And we'll wear masks a lot more. I mean, they've been wearing masks in Asia for years. So I think,
and in our industry, it actually makes the vast majority of us more attractive.
Indeed. So yeah, how is it going to change? As I say, it's we're learning to live with talking to people, interviewing people over. Sort of meeting them virtually, but as I say, that's going to be important how they work. This is the new norm from now on. There'll be less interaction. We need to get back to networking in some way. I mean, this is what I miss more than anything. I went to an event last event I went to was in Zurich in March. It was an investor event. It was, and you meet people, you have dinner, we have a great time, we have a few beers, a lot of discussions, meet new people. And then 2 weeks later, the shutters come down. I think we need to get back to, at least having dinner with people and a few beers with people. Because that's the way that we interact. You can't really meet people properly in this medium. So that has to happen. I think we have to get back to that bit. Otherwise, we're all going to go crazy. I'm already, I was quite enjoying being locked down, I must confess, for a while. It didn't affect me at all. But I'm now getting a bit fed up with it. I can't wait to, as I say, I booked a flight. My son is in New York. He's up in the Hudson Valley. He's just moved there from Austin. He's been in America for 15 years. So I have a granddaughter. I have a family there, but we haven't seen him for a year. So today I booked a flight for Easter, hoping that we'll get back to that. So we'll creep back into it, but I don't think, I think we won't go back to completely how it was before, because this thing is still going to be here, although we're going to be vaccinated. Who knows? Vaccinations last for a year or 6 months or whatever. So we're going to have to get used to it. And then something else is going to come along. So,
I think beyond the obvious, just the fact that we now, once this particular pandemic gets past us, I think, the notion that people have now have the ability to prioritize when they travel, and you'll not necessarily need to travel for business for things that are fairly innocuous. It should lead to just a better, work-life balance, or as Nabil likes to call it, life-work balance, and that sort of thing, where you don't have to, gone hopefully will be the days where, the people, I know my son has friends whose parents are in finance, and I know we all know a lot of people in finance that were traveling basically, 5-6 days a week, sometimes for weeks at a time, doing deal closings and all that. And the fact that there'll be like a 1-year pause in that sort of thing. And that industry has now kind of evolved to recognize that a lot of those things that used to be in person can now be done remotely. That's not to say that there's no need to have in-person meetings and networking, but I really think the collaborative networking elements, which may have not necessarily taken precedence or priority, are the things that we miss the most, I think, universally. And those are going to be the things that you prioritize, not just like getting formalized signatures or shaking hands and signing on the dotted line. Those things, those were relics years ago, but for some reason, you just, couldn't get past it until you were forced to.
And it's given us more time, of course, as well. So we don't waste time, going from A to B. So we should be more productive, with all these tools that we've got. We should be doing better. Maybe things will evolve quicker. We're still nirvana for our industry is just making stuff available, quicker, cheaper. We all want things to be delivered, in a heartbeat. So latency is important. Availability is important. Cost is important. And I think we're going to be driving, all those kind of things we're moving forward on. And life will be very different, better, worse, who knows? I'll be able to see more. Or maybe I will get to the end of The Sopranos one day. I don't know. I'm still trying.
If there's one thing, I know I now live in Jersey, so it might be cliche. If there's one thing I can tell you is you should prioritize getting to maybe not to the last episode of The Sopranos. The ending is a little bit, not everyone's cup of tea, but what an amazing series that I'm now living on a daily basis. Anyway, this has been a great conversation. I have to assume that if you are able to make that trip next Easter, that you will swing by and we can meet in person in New York, and maybe Nabil will manage to finally escape Kona and the West Coast, which I consider one place for you.
Absolutely,
it's a deal. I'd love to do that, Phil. Yeah, be good.
I'm glad that you were able to take the time to join us. Just to recap a few things. One, that there is going to be some sort of normalcy in the very near future. As mankind, we tend to take massive swings from rush to being totally isolated. And we are hoping that there's going to be some sort of a central medium where life is of more value to all of us. And we are learning something from this pandemic. I kind of put it this way, that it's Mother Nature's way of teaching us a lesson to create the life and work balance. Another thing to recap on is the fact, and it's actually kind of really a good news that you shared with us, that there is enough talent coming into our space, into information technology and data centers. We still need to encourage younger generation to stay engaged and involved. And this is an opportunity. Infrastructure, IT, data centers. It is the future. It's the data rush. Start engaging yourself, be yourself, get into space, and try to make a difference. Based on your previous experiences, what advice would you give the younger generation or someone wanting to enter into our space?
Well, I think any space, it's do as much stuff as you can. I don't regret. I don't regret really anything I've done. The worst thing must be to regret something you didn't do that you wanted to do. So just get out there. I don't know how you tell kids to do this, but you need to do this stuff. Don't say no. I mean, there are times when, someone will say to me, let's go out and do this. And I'm thinking, I don't feel like it, but I will. So in between working, we've done a lot. One thing that brought it home to me, there was an advertisement on the TV. I think it was Virgin Travel, where there's a young guy walking on the street, and he sits down on a bench underneath the church. And as he sits down, there's one of these big statues at the top, cracks and starts to fall down right on him. He's looking up, and everything slows down, and this statue and as it slows down, the Grim Reaper comes and sits next to him. And this guy is thinking about, when he's young, he's partying, he's dancing, he's sailing, he's surfing, he's drinking with his pals, and this thing is still coming down slower and slower. And he's thinking about all these things that he did. And in the end, the Grim Reaper falls asleep, and the guy gets up and walks away. And the caption comes up. It says, when your past life is flashing before you, make sure you've got plenty to see. And I thought that was a brilliant thing. How awful to be sitting in your rocking chair, when you're old and can't move, and all you're thinking about is the days you spent on your screen, doing stuff. I just think you've got to get out and do other stuff. Life, there is more to life than work, what we do. So this work-life balance thing, even if you don't feel like doing it, just go out, get on your bike, go for a walk, do something, but make sure you do enough that, as I say, you've got plenty to see when you get old. And I think I'm fortunate that I've done that. My career has let me visit most countries of the globe. It's probably easy to count the ones I haven't been to, but
Peter, this was absolutely phenomenal. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Really enjoyed having you.
Thank you.
Amazing.
I enjoyed it.
This has been great. Nothing lasts forever. Markets will come back, currencies will rebound, businesses will go on, and we'll all move on. That could happen next week, next month, or next year. I'm confident that those who prepare rather than panic will come out of this stronger. Thank you for joining us. This has been brought to you by Nomad Futurist. Check us online at nomadfuturist.com.